Thank you for visiting our channel. Please subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button. You can also click on the bell, which will notify you by email when a new video is posted. That way you're able to stay in touch with us and get the latest updates.
Welcome to the Lunch and Learn program. My name is JoAnne Vieweg, and I'm president of the board of directors of the Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network. Meg, who's another one of our board members, is here as well. The Red River Valley Asperger Autism Network is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower, support, educate about, and advocate for persons on the autism spectrum and their families. We are grateful to Prairie St. John's for partnering with us and providing the space and the lunch for this event today. The format today is a brief overview of the topic, followed by a question and answer session. We will try to repeat the questions so that everyone can hear them. We're privileged to have on our panel today an adult with Asperger syndrome and one of our professionals who's a partner to our group. I would like to ask you to introduce yourselves. John, would you like to start?
Sure. Hello, my name is John Cody. I have Asperger syndrome. I am able to give you a perspective through my life with answering questions, and you may have heard me speak at the conference this past month. And I'm going to be able to just answer those questions, and it's my goal and my own personal mission to help students like them.
Thank you, John. And I can't tell you how valuable it is to me to hear your perception and take on things from your point of view. It has helped me enormously understand my grandson better.
And I'm Emily Kohler-Hansen. I'm a therapist here in our virtual program for kids on the autism spectrum. So it's kind of like a day program. They're here in the morning around 8:30 and they're done at 3, and I get to spend all day with them, and it's pretty darn fun.
Okay, thank you. And Barb is here and is handing out the the PowerPoints. Thank you, Barb. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. All right, the topic today is preparing for the holidays, adding fun to the fundamentals of the holidays. One of the things that I think most of us realize when we're approaching a holiday of any kind, even like a day off of school, that it can throw off our young people with Asperger's or autism because it's different. The time tends to be less structured or structured in a different way. There's a change in the schedules. And we know that that can be difficult transitioning to those changes. And some of the things that work are using, for example, a countdown device. If you're looking at Christmas, it would be maybe a calendar that has how many days till Christmas or ornaments that they put together. My daughter, who has neurotypical children, they make a paper chain and take one link off every day as they approach it. Because the 4-year-old and 7-year-old, last year it was really a big deal. The 3- and 6-year-old couldn't wait, and so this way they could see. And again, that's kind of like a visual schedule. And then keep as much of the routine as possible and let them know ahead of time what kinds of changes to expect. One thing that we might not always think about is that foods and the scents around the holidays could be overwhelming to our kiddos and our young adults. We know that their sensory systems are much more attuned to certain things that could seem overwhelming to them. I love the smell of pumpkin pie. My grandson does not. He has Asperger's, he's 16. And he's gotten to the point where he can say, oh, why do we have to have that? Rather than, you know, kind of get really, really stressed. He's come to where he'll tolerate it, but it was good for me to know that he just doesn't like that. There tend to be a lot more crowds when we go shopping. Even around Halloween and Thanksgiving, things are different. There are a lot more people in different situations than they're accustomed to. certain stereotyped issues might become more pronounced, like if the person likes to touch their food before eating it or arrange it a certain way on the plate. That could get magnified when the stress or anxiety level goes up a little bit because of all of the changes. We need to be thoughtful about dietary needs and make sure that we're on top of those. Also, too much sugar can be an issue. I know I'm a parent, a grandparent, and a former teacher. And when the doctors say, oh no, that's hogwash, that kids can be sensitive to too much sugar, I think anecdotally, those of us who've raised kids know. For many, many children, that is a truth. It's not a vanity. So I think one of the things that we can be cognizant of and just aware of is to respect what they like and don't like. I found that making the pumpkin pie and putting it with a cover and putting it in the refrigerator was better for my grandson. Well, I didn't mind. I wanted to keep it cool anyway. Trying to keep, sometimes just keeping the menu as familiar as possible it can be a real help. Making sure that you're respecting what their dietary needs are, especially if they need to be gluten-free. That's a really important thing to be aware of during the holidays. This one about allowing them to eat separately might sound kind of odd, but I know with extended family around, sometimes they will not understand, well, why can't he stay with the rest of us, or why can't she eat like everybody else? If you have the sense that it's going to be overwhelming, it's going to be an unpleasant experience, then, that's your prerogative as their caregiver to say, this is better for him or her. I don't know, in my family we used to have a kids' table, and the kids liked it when they got old enough to graduate to the grown-up table. It was a practical thing, not everybody could fit at the table. Our family is much smaller now because we're not near as much of the extended family as we used to be. But we still will allow Colin, if he gets to a certain point, well, you can go eat that in the kitchen if you prefer. But he's able to speak up for that now. That's not always comfortable to advocate for because not everybody understands that. This is something to be kind of thinking about too, especially around the Christmas holidays, is all of those lights that can be a distraction. It can be too much. It just occurred to me, we like to go out and look at the lights around the neighborhood in the dark. My grandson doesn't like to do that. And it just occurred to me why. It's too bright, it's different, and it's just not something that's enjoyable for him. But one thing that I think is really interesting to pay attention to is that sometimes seizures, if a person has a seizure disorder, seizures can be triggered by those flashing lights. Were you aware of that can be a trigger for some folks? It also triggers my daughter's migraines too sometimes if she's around too much of that. So just be cautious about the lighting. And include the child in deciding what you're going to do and where we're going to go and if we're going to try out this new environment. And maybe just change one thing at a time as you approach the holidays, rather than, boom, all of a sudden all these people are here and we're eating all this different food and our schedule is completely different.
And also with the lights, fluorescent lights in some stores have more of a fluttering. And if you have a younger child that can't really communicate why they are feeling panic, that could be because in that particular store, those fluorescent lights bother.
That's a really important point. Were you aware that fluorescent lights have an ongoing flicker? That's how they work. It's usually at such a high speed that we don't notice it.
But people on the spectrum like myself do, and they can drive us crazy. And just raise a stress level up to a boiling point. Just completely overwhelmed because of that flicker that I can just pick up on that other people might not be able to.
Well, and I discovered when I was in college, sitting in the library, I kept getting headaches, and I thought it was just because I was working such a long time, and I mentioned it to my psychology teacher for some reason, I don't remember why, and he said, "Are you under fluorescent lights?" And I said, "Yes, that's what's in the library." And he said, "Well, some people are sensitive to the flicker in those. And if I don't notice it, I don't see it or sense it, but I will get a headache after a while if I'm under fluorescent lights for a long period of time." So I'm glad you brought that point up, because that is something, it's one of those kind of unseen sensory things that it helps if we just pay attention to it. So, John, that's why I like to have you here to let us know about that. That, you know, I didn't know what it was that was bothering me, and now it really makes sense to me. Another thing that around a lot in the Jewish tradition as well as Christian tradition is light candles. And again, we have to think about the scents of some of those candles could be overwhelming for someone. Flickering flames can be bothersome, and they could be a hazard for those kiddos who are fascinated by fire. So some things you could do to accommodate that would be to use unscented candles. Or there's these new flameless candles that just are a light that goes on. I've seen some though that flicker and look like a flame, so that might not work. And always put candles out of reach. We have a 2.5-year-old granddaughter who spends a lot of time at our house now, and we don't have candles out anymore. It's just not worth trying to keep on top of it. So. Now here's something that we can deal with, stress with over the Christmas and Hanukkah season particularly, is those presents. The other things we've talked about so far could relate to Thanksgiving as well, but the presents thing can be a really big deal, and it challenges the kids with their executive functioning skills like patience and waiting, seeing those presents sitting out there. When can I look at one? When can I open it? What kind of, you know, how long do I have to wait? And why can't I open it now? And without even really thinking too much about it, we just started putting them away and not putting them out until Christmas Eve. But then we learned you can't put many out because Cindy wants to open them all on Christmas Eve. So we have, everybody in the family has one present you open on Christmas Eve, and it says open on Christmas Eve. And it's a new pair of pajamas, you know, which he's not really excited about that. But, you know, thinking about how to help them develop that patience. And sometimes the best thing to do is just not put them out. Some kids don't do well with surprises, so not knowing what's in there can be kind of stressful as well. Or they get, we could get embarrassed by blunt responses. Oh, I have one of these already. Or, why'd you get it in green? I don't like, you know, that kind of thing. As we know, our kids may not, aren't always aware of how what they do or say impacts somebody else. And they give that blunt first response because that part of their brain that filters, what do I say before I think it, but what do I think it, but what do you think?
It also comes down to just not being born with social skills and understanding certain etiquettes, but you know, that is learned over time. But what would be natural for somebody else would not be something that we would know instinctively. So that's where you get a little bit of problems, but you know, training and learning can really help with those.
How would you suggest approaching teaching a child what to say when they open a present? What would be a good way to do that, do you think?
Well, I would say, like you said, you do something on Christmas Eve, maybe a little bit more private, so it's not around other family members, and then just beforehand, just kind of let them know that it's kind of a tough one.
I think you're onto something. Let them know ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like maybe practice?
Yeah,
What
I would
to
say
say?
practice and what to say, and just letting them know that no, a present is more of a gift. It's not always going to be exactly what you want, and then just ahead of time, like you say, you do the Christmas Eve ones. Just see what they say, and then kind of work on what you think would be acceptable and not acceptable. And once they realize what is socially acceptable, they're going to be more wanting to do that, because we want to learn, we want to fit in socially. It's just sometimes we don't have that instinct to know, early on.
Thank you.
So we also do, with our kids, we do practice presents, and we'll do this in a group, and we'll wrap up random items. It's not going to be a new Lego set. It might be a book from the classroom, it might be a notepad, it might be an orange, random things. And the kids won't know ahead of time, but we challenge them to find one thing you like about it. And that's what we want you to comment on. Because even still to this day, sometimes my grandma might give me a gift, and I might not say, Grandma, this sweater's not my color, but I might say, wow, Grandma, this is a really soft sweater, thank you. And so you find the one thing you like, and that's what we say out loud. And so you can practice. Kids love opening presents. So if we did fun practice presents before Christmas, it can be a really fun activity, and challenge them to find and say that one thing they like about it. Even if it's, I already have this Lego set, wow, more Legos. Legos are my favorite, and say that one nice thing, and then we can practice with another present.
So it's kind of like a social rehearsal then.
Yeah.
Right.
Practicing. But what a fun idea, we could have done.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then sometimes the child will get just really stuck on just the one present, not necessarily want to go on to the next one. I see that a lot with little guys at birthday presents and stuff. And they want to play. Well, everybody wants to open the next thing. And, I'm always, when it's my present, I'm kind of thrilled he likes it that much. So, again, the kinds of things we've already been talking about is don't put presents out. Don't tease about presents. Like, gee, I wonder what's in here. Can you guess? And rattle and shake it. That just can up that. That's not nice. And again, give a few presents ahead of time. Maybe we're going to have these to open ahead of time. Sometimes works. And then a different schedule for opening presents. Maybe not with everybody all there at the same time. And then you talked about a script to how to, when you put it into a game format, how to say. And then a social story would be very similar to that, where you write out a story about on Christmas morning, there will be presents under the tree, Grandma and Grandpa will be there, your brother and sister will be there, and I'm excited about presents. I can't wait to open my presents. I'm going to have to wait because so that's the kind of thing that the way a social story could be written, and then you read that together for a while ahead of time. And redirecting obsessive behaviors. Again, that kind of is. Those are tricks we kind of learn for each individual child. What works for one might not work for another. But finding the way to change focus or distract will often be helpful there. The problems with relatives and other interlopers. This is like, it's all this kind of thing, the unwritten social expectations, like John was talking about. You're expected that they're going to touch you and you should hug them back, and that you're going to have to share things, and there's going to be a lot of people around and a lot of extra noise. All the kinds of things that we know are triggers for a lot of our kids. And then you, as the caregivers, have to deal with misunderstandings, people not knowing what's going on and why you're tweaking things a little bit differently for your child. And they could give you lots of advice. How many people here have heard or been told at some point, well, if you just did it differently, he would behave better, or she? Yeah, it's like a universal experience, I think, for us. And again, that's because people don't really understand. And they get judged, often. Brad?
But I think we can see that too, even without raising our kids that are on the spectrum now, that we've seen that in the past with raising just our regular typical kids with our older parents as they were raised in a particular way, and as it's been passed down, that that's something that goes generational. well, we never allowed that in our home, or this or that.
Mhm.
I think, you know, sometimes we need to be proactive with our relatives and say, listen, these are some special needs, and this is something I just need to let you know that, you know, these are things, so that we can kind of help catch things in advance when we do them.
And sometimes you have to also put up that, you know, that kind of rubber barrier that those comments bounce off of you, because, you know, they're usually well-intentioned. And again, like you said, just they don't understand or haven't learned yet what the child or the adult needs. There's inconsistency all around the place with all of these new people. And oftentimes, well, the schedule we know is going to be different, and the living arrangements may
Can you
change.
explain more about the inconsistent responses?
Well, I think you could look at that in terms of the relatives. You won't necessarily know if somebody's going to be loving and kind, or if somebody's going to go, why are you acting that way, kind of thing. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Yeah. And in living arrangements, you know, if you travel out of town and you take your child with you and maybe stay at grandma's house, or, you know, is that going to work out? Sometimes people just decide, you know, maybe it'd be easier for us to be in a hotel, which, again, you might get criticized for that, but I think finding a safe way for your child to get away from the stressors and those triggers that we know can up their anxiety and make it not a pleasant situation. We always think everybody just loves holidays because there's so many fun things going on. Well, you can enjoy things in different ways. But we've already talked about some of these already, letting people know, educating our family members about what is going to happen, how we've planned it for our child, and why, and we're just going to do it this way. And let the child know ahead of time what the plans are, and keep structure as much as you can. For my grandson, sometimes the structure is you can go in the corner by yourself, or in the other room by yourself. For him, that's structure because it's away from all of this unstructured stuff. Respecting boundaries. And I think what this is about is, for example, sometimes we have to say to a relative, you know, he just doesn't like to be hugged. Please don't hug him unless you ask first. Or he's not going to do hugs today. I know my grandson is more comfortable if you ask him first, or if he initiates, because he'll hug, but if it's his idea, if he starts it. But having that foisted upon you is not always comfortable for a lot of our kids. One of the things that can be helpful is like a little picture book of who to expect to be there. Like if you're going to be going out of town and there's going to be relatives that your child maybe hasn't seen for a while, a photo album or a storybook that you create can kind of let them know. We did this when my grandson was 5 and they were moving to a new house, and we took pictures of a moving van and furniture being put into the moving van, and then I had taken a picture of the house we were moving to ahead of time when we bought it, and we put this in a storybook so that he knew what was happening. Well, this is long before we knew he had Asperger's. He wasn't diagnosed until he was 8. And oh my gosh, it was he read that book on the trip in the car, and you know, things that are really important for our kids are good for all kids. So that was just kind of a nice little way to introduce him to the move. It works really nicely too for a holiday event. And then find that safe place for them to escape to and know that they're going to be okay to go by themselves. I remember these traveling when you were a kid with your brother and sister on either side, and squabbles over the space and all of that. Well, again, that just brings up lots of sensory issues. And again, changing in routine to do that traveling, and everybody's kind of maybe excited, but that means they're a little bit on edge. And there's all that anticipation can be a good thing or a bad thing, and boredom. Those can all be factors in there. So pack a friendly kid-friendly bag of their favorite things. Pre-teach things that are going to happen on the trip. Have snacks and meals along the way. Take breaks. Have them help plan. Maybe they could follow on the map. Where are we and where do we stop next? Visual schedules always help. And then once you get there, having a quiet time, just that breathing for everybody. Be sure you're paying attention to safety concerns and then decide, is this going to work better if we stay with the relatives, or is it going to be smoother all around if we stay in a hotel? Again, just think about what the sensory issues are like. Shopping, there's so many people there. I can't tell you how many people I've been behind at the store who are irritated that they're waiting in line so long and they're crabby. And these are adults shopping. And it's like, just take a breath and say, it's the time of year, I know it's going to be like this. I can do that. My grandson can't. It's not as easy for him. It can be overstimulating, and that patience and all those executive skills are challenged at this time. Another trick that helps is to go at off times. Go like during the dinner hour when you think maybe nobody else will be there. Sometimes Sunday right at noon, when people are coming home from church and they're going to eat, skip that meal and go shopping then. There may not be so many people there. Try to reduce surprises and unexpected things. And then build in your positive behavior supports, the things that help your child. Break time where they have dedicated time to play their Nintendo or their computer or whatever, or puzzles or reading, whatever it is that kind of helps them stay calm. Or let them stay home. Maybe they don't want to go shopping. I actually am my grandson's personal shopper. He hates to shop at the store, so I go, and the people at Penny's know me. I'll buy a whole bunch of things and say, now I can return these if he doesn't like them, is that right? And he'll try them on in the house. Maybe in 2 days, he won't, when he's ready. But, it saves a lot of aggravation for him and for me. These are two really interesting YouTube things. The first one is just an example of what it's like to walk through Walmart. And I think, Gerhard, this is a little bit about kind of what you were talking about. It shows what that feels like to be in an unfamiliar, noisy place. And then the second one down there, and it is in your handout if you can read it, it's pretty tiny, is what it's like to walk down the street. And the thing that I think it's really eye-opening because it shows all the little things that this person gets distracted by. And it just helps you understand from that point of view. And we always need to think about what's reasonable to expect for the child, not necessarily what I want to do. Give them lots of time to charge. Plan ahead and work on this ahead of time. And lots of praise and reinforcement, recognition for the things that you're pleased that they're doing, that you hope that they would do and want them to do. And then have that quiet little sensory area for them to get away from. One we always forget about is ourselves. If you're not filled up inside yourself, you don't have as much to give. And so it's not selfish to take time away for yourself. And parent support groups are one really good way to do that. Have a friend to talk to, go for a walk, do the kinds of things that are reinforcing for you. My daughter goes to a show or a play or a movie because that recharges her. She likes to do that, and it helps her get ready to deal with the next day with her children. And especially talk with other folks who get it. And maybe you'll be needing to find a different way to celebrate that from what you're accustomed to. And that's okay. Do fun things like making ornaments out of Legos. Barb Stanton is the one who provided this really is a tweak of her work, all of this, but making ornaments out of Legos or doing holiday trivia. Particular movies that you think the child might be interested in. Watch out for the signs that are leading up to a meltdown and help them get away from that beforehand. Don't stop the stimming behaviors. Those are the self-stimulating behaviors. Those are the things that are helping them cope and relax and calm themselves in that stressful situation. Build lots of distractions and breaks, and don't get in the car with the Nintendo not charged. We ran into that one time. I ended up buying an adapter so that I could charge it in my car. Figure out how you're going to handle things if a meltdown does happen. And these are some other resources that you might consider looking at. These are all the contacts for the network if you're interested in finding out more about what we do or when our support groups are and when our activities occur. We have a new person working on our website now who's got the calendar out. There's a pink calendar page that is the upcoming events in December. So it's a hectic time of the year to keep track of all of that. So we put that on the calendar. So that was supposed to be in a nutshell, even though it went a little longer than the nutshell period. So does anybody have any comments or questions or things you'd like to ask? Does anybody have some tricks of the trade that you use that work well for you with your kids and your families? Any tricks for talking to family members about your child?
I think one thing to add is that a lot of times we put a lot of time and effort into coaching our kids and preparing ahead of time and all of these things. And if we don't prepare our families and all of the other people coming in the same way, we really put all the responsibility on our kids to handle that situation really well. And that's hard, and I think there's a lot of great learning opportunities, but we also want to set our family members up to have a good holiday too. So I think if we have that phone call ahead of time and just check in and say, so-and-so's been having a hard time and holidays are really rough, here's what we're going to do to make sure that it goes smoothly. Could you help us with this piece of it? Or just, this year I think we're setting up a kids table. Or, whatever it is that you plan to accommodate your child with, let the rest of the family know, because it also puts it on them too a little bit, and not just your kid to be responsible for making sure the holiday goes well. And your family always wants to help with something. If you can task somebody with being in charge, the older cousins, can you please be in charge of doing Legos with this person? A lot of times they really eat that up and have something to do. It's really nice.
That's a really great idea, is to ask somebody to help in a specific way. But a lot of times people want to help, they just don't know what it is they need to do. Educating the family helped us a lot. My mother, who's going to be 90 in a couple of weeks, was Colin's great grandmother and didn't know anything at all about autism when we told her about it. And she's a hugger and always has an activity for the kids, had when she was in her own home. And so she was kind of set up to be disappointed. So when he didn't want to do those kinds of things. So I just kind of kept telling her, it took more than one time, that he probably won't want to hug you, and we don't have him have to hug people. So don't get your feelings hurt because he just isn't comfortable. You could ask him if he wants a hug, and he might. Well, it took a long time, took a couple times. And then he did hug her. And he was like a, elementary school age child at this time. He wasn't just a little toddler. And she came to me later that day and said, he hugged me. I'm so glad he hugged me. So she was able to do what we do, which is share in those little celebrations of the things that he could accomplish. And she has a very different view now of him and autism, having gone through that, and just learning a little bit at a time. she's very proud of him that he has a job and everything. So, and sometimes it could be hard in the family. You may have one person who kind of hangs out there and doesn't really get it, and then I think what you do is just kind of protect your child from that person and just kind of be observant of what's going on, and because some people don't change their minds about things.
One thing that you reminded me of with one of these things here was if you're somebody that you haven't seen for a while is visiting, just remind your children of who this person is, because it can be a little unnerving if there's a person that you don't really recognize at a family gathering. I had that experience this past summer. I had my aunt and uncle over, and I know them very well, and another person walked in the house. I didn't know who this person was. So I was a little nervous, and then afterwards I just asked, who was that person? So just let them know ahead of time, you know, if it's someone that they haven't seen for a long time, for years and years and years, of who this person is. I haven't seen this person like over a decade, so.
Well, that's really good advice. And some people have a hard time remembering a face. You might remember a name or a voice, but might not recognize that particular face. And so being able to give them the name along with it. So, I'm the opposite. I remember the face and I can't remember the name. But thank you, John. I think that's a good advice for all of us anyway, but especially for.
And I like what you said about respecting boundaries too. There are going to be a few boundaries because of just some extrasensory issues, like you said, with hugging, with just a little uncomfortable something. So I would definitely agree with that. That's the one thing that really stuck out on that slide was respecting boundaries, especially until we're a bit more comfortable around somebody.
Great. I'm glad, because that reminds me also that as someone I'm a retired school counselor as well as a teacher, we were always cautious or just aware of safety for children. And we want to teach children to be able to say no if they feel uncomfortable about something. And even in a family situation, I think we need to respect the fact that they may not be comfortable, and it's okay to say no. And again, grandma might not understand that, but a simple explanation, I think, often will help that. So that teaching boundaries is important on a lot of levels. So, yes?
Curious, like with John and your grandson, during the holidays, would it make a difference to have people come to you when you're in your own surroundings and environment versus you going somewhere else? Is it more overwhelming for you to go to relatives or have people come to you?
I'm at a point where it's okay either way, but earlier on I would say that at your own surroundings there's less change, so that'd be a little simpler, because now it's not just new people, it's a new surrounding for someplace else. So if you're just changing one variable instead of two variables, that would be a little easier.
That was a really interesting question. I'm glad you asked that, because that sometimes it could be kind of an easy first step. And again, like you said, it's changed the one thing. It reminds me too of when we said like sharing and some of those other things are going to be hard. One thing we did when he was little was say there are going to be people around here and their kids are going to want to play with your toys. And I know you have some favorite ones that you might not want anybody else to touch. So let's put those away. And then you're going to have to share the rest because the other kids didn't bring any toys with them. And he wrapped his head around that really easily. So that can be kind of a protective device in his own territory. Well, but I still don't have to share everything. You know, I can select these things out and put them away. Again, that's kind of like setting up a boundary for him so he can be safe.
I would also check in with your loved ones and ask, you know, what was your favorite part of the holidays last year? And it might surprise you what their answer is. This has kind of become a Thanksgiving tradition in our house. What was your favorite part of the holidays last year? Because then we try and make sure we do those things. Because you'd be so surprised at what their little minds will remember, and it might not be something that was significant to you. And it surprises me every year that the requests are things like, remember last year when we watched the Snoopy Christmas on TV and we had popcorn and Kool-Aid? And I just go, are you kidding me? Like, of all the stuff we did that holiday, that was what stuck out to you? Yes, we can do that again. That was the easiest thing we did. We were in our pajamas, it was inexpensive, you know, and so I would check in with them and see, what is it that was really special to you last year, and what do you want to do again? So you can remember, because they might be thinking of it, thinking it's going to happen, and you won't know that that's what they might have their heart set on. And then they can also be a part of the planning of, okay, so do you want to be in charge of making the Kool-Aid, or do you want to pick what night we do this? And that helps them kind of be involved and organized and have that thing to look forward to. So it might surprise you. It might not be, oh, I like, you know, really like it when Great Aunt Sue brings that casserole with all the stuff in it, you know, because that might happen.
And like you said, if they're kind of silently expecting it and you don't know that, they could be really disappointed over something that could be an easy.
Yeah. And think about sensory issues when you wrap your gifts. My cousin's on the spectrum. I know not to put any ribbons on it because that is really hard for him. He doesn't like it, and it takes all the fun out of opening a gift. So I'll put ribbons on everyone else's because I love the way they look on presents, but his I just wrap, and that's it. He doesn't like the tissue paper inside. He doesn't like boxes that are hard to open. So his favorite is if you put something in a gift bag and nothing else. And to me, that's less fun because everyone can see what's in there. But he kind of knows ahead of time what everything is, so he can kind of plan for what he's getting, and it takes the surprise and that anxiety away from, I don't know what's in there. And so he really likes that. And so we kind of try and plan for that too. So think about that as you wrap your gifts, because if you hand somebody something that they don't even want to touch and expect them to open it and be excited, that's pretty hard.
Well, but the whole idea of surprise is something that we all want and like, but you know, that may not be what the gift recipient wants.
I have one family who their son on the spectrum helps and goes shopping. They take one day off of school. He picks out his Christmas gifts. They do this during the day while it's not busy. And he gets to help wrap them and knows what's in every single one before they open them. But that's what makes his Christmas so fun, is that he knows what he's getting. There's no anxiety. There's no disappointment if I didn't get this, and he has kind of that control over what it is. I mean, he's given a budget and parameters and those sorts of things, but you know, he gets to pick 3 things, and here's how much we're going to spend, and so he's really a part of that, and it takes all the anxiety out and him just the time. And other kids, that might not be fun at all, but you know.
But boy, that really causes us to have a complete shift in how we view.
Well, actually,
holiday.
I kind of do like a hybrid of those 2 different things. I will generally purchase one gift myself, and then whatever else would that someone else would give me as a present would be the surprise. So it's a hybrid. I know one thing, everything else is surprise. So I think that is kind of comfortable and acceptable for both mindsets. Both.
And you could adapt that to a family member by saying, yes, you are going to get this, but I'm not going to tell you what other things are. So
Right.
we kind of have a surprise. Is that okay?
So that it's
But
okay
I
to
really
have
like
some.
that idea.
Yeah, you can still have lots of prizes, but you know, one gift that they know what it is ahead of time, and everything else is surprise.
But it's probably going to have to be the big one that I really wanted him to be surprised to get. But see, I have to shift my thinking then about all of that. It's more fun for him if he knows ahead of time. Yes.
I don't like it when things change.
I don't either.
It makes me upset inside.
See,
I remember before I started working when I first started working at Prairie for about 2 weeks, they said that I was going to have a tour, but then when something happened and there was a change of plans. I actually got up early. It was when I still lived at Terrence, or not Sunrise Estates. Yeah. And another thing I didn't like was being forced to move to Riverview against my will.
sometimes there are things that you don't want to have happen and have to happen anyway. It makes you uncomfortable.
I really liked sunrise. It wasn't, it was just, I liked it.
Do you have, let me ask you this question. When you do feel yourself getting uncomfortable, like if something, like something changes and you don't like that feeling, is there something you do that helps you feel calm?
Well, I don't really know, because I never really get, you know, stressed out or having a meltdown. It's basically just when things just don't work right, or usually it's working in the morning when something doesn't work right. I don't remember, like Wednesday, I woke up at like 6:20. And I was kind of upset about that, but I was really smart about that. You know. I don't really have meltdowns for autistic because I'm only partly autistic.
So you told yourself when you woke up that day and you said I was smart about that, you just told yourself, oh, it's going to be okay. Yeah. Well, good. That's something you did to help calm yourself down.
Easy breakfast, exercise meal. I didn't want to put anything in my plate and might waste time, so I just it was really good yogurt.
Great.
Well, and Oinkel is Greek yogurt, that's really flavor, really good yogurt.
Well, it's nice to have you tell us what works for you and what that feels like. So thank you for telling us that. We're almost out of time. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to talk about or bring up or ask?
Or ask questions.
I guess we're finished then. Thank you everybody for coming. Please remember, please do fill out that feedback form. And those tickets are available for It's a Wonderful Night if you're interested in that. And thank you very much for coming and have a good holiday.